Hello everyone, welcome to Best Recipes with Sharon. Did you ever wonder how to make these? They're called English Muffins. Well, I did, and I decided to give it a try. Of course, they're the very best because they're homemade. My intentions in this video is to help you to make these perfectly the very first time. So come along with me to my kitchen and we'll go ahead and get these done. My cookbook is available on Amazon, and I've provided a quick link in the description below this video. Without further ado, let's get right to making English muffins. Using a medium-sized saucepan, start by adding half a cup of water. Then add 3/4 cup of milk. And then 2 tablespoons of white sugar. Then place the saucepan on the stove over medium heat. Heat it up using a thermometer until the temperature reaches about 110. It is 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And if it goes up a little bit higher than that, you have to let it cool off a little bit before you add the yeast. Pour that into a large mixing bowl and then go ahead and melt some butter in the same saucepan. You'll need about 3 tablespoons of melted butter. And I'll check the temperature again, 109.7, and that's close enough. Now then, we'll add 2 1/4 teaspoons of fast rising yeast. Let this mixture sit for a little bit so that the yeast dissolves. So about 5 to 10 minutes. Meanwhile, crack open a large egg into a small bowl, and then just take a fork and whisk it, and simply go ahead and pour that into the mixture. Then add the 3 tablespoons of melted butter. In order to make English muffins, it's going to be a wet dough, so you need to use the paddle attachment. We'll get ready to add a little bit of all-purpose flour. So measure out 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, and then I add a teaspoon of salt. And you can mix that in a little bit, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to be putting it all into the batter anyways. Now pay attention to this next part because it's important that you mix this together using the paddle attachment for about 7 minutes straight. I turned the mixer to level 6, which is medium-high, and then timed it for about 7 minutes. What happens in the process of whipping it is the dough thickens up, so check this out. So peel the dough off of the paddle attachment. I find it easier to grease my hands when handling this dough, so you can do that too if you like. So I grease a medium-sized bowl, grease it fairly well, spoon the dough into the bowl. The dough will be sticky and quite tacky. Now, even though you don't want to add any more flour to this, you can go ahead and grease or flour your hands just so that you can shape the dough a little bit, because you want it to be evenly smoothed out in the bowl, because as this rises now, the bowl will actually be shaping the dough for you. So you'll cover the bowl with a warm towel, put it in a warm place to rise for about 2 hours. Time's up and the dough's probably double in size. Lightly flour some parchment paper. Then turn the bowl upside down and let the dough fall out of the bowl onto the parchment paper. Now I'll need to coat the top and the bottom of the dough with some durum wheat semolina or some cornmeal, whatever you have on hand. Be gentle with the dough, but transfer it onto the coated parchment paper. And gently pat the dough down and shape the sides with your fingers. Do not roll the dough out. Then use a 3-inch round cookie cutter to cut out your English muffins. You can transfer them to the parchment paper on a cookie sheet, and don't forget to coat your cookie sheet and the tops of these with the cornmeal semolina wheat flour. Use the semolina wheat flour because it's a little bit finer, and putting a little flour on the cookie cutter really helps because you got to be so gentle with this dough that you don't want to have a hard time getting it to leave the cookie cutter when you want to put it on to the parchment paper on the cookie sheet. It transfers much easier. And when you're doing this, your dough is probably about 1 inch thick at this point. And this recipe will make enough for between 10 and 12 English muffins. Okay, and when you've got them all cut, then you go ahead and sprinkle the top with some of the wheat semolina or the cornmeal, depending on what you're using. But I like how fine the wheat semolina is. So give the top a generous coating of this and gently pat it down. And don't forget to use the leftover dough and shape it into whatever you can with your hands. It only needs to rise for about a half an hour. And now we're ready to have it rise once more, so cover it with a warm towel. A preheated grill, thoroughly and lightly greased with canola oil. The dough looks like it has rose, probably close to double in size. So it's time to go ahead and grill them. You can actually fry them in a frying pan, but I choose not to do that because it's a lot harder to do. It's difficult to keep your temperature nice and even, where a grill will do that for you, and you have less chance of burning them. So I do cut the parchment paper around each individual one. I found the perfect temperature to be between 275 degrees and 300 Fahrenheit. As I've cut the parchment paper between each of them, I can take an individual one and transfer it much easier. It needs to be covered, so I'm just going to put a pot over top of this one. I got my temperature up there. I'm going to time it and see how long it takes before I need to turn it. And then cover it again so that the other side browns and it heats through, just like an oven effect. The first one turned out so well, I got brave and I did all the rest all at once, and that's the beauty of the grill. So the time that it takes will be approximately 5 minutes per side. So you flip it over and do another 5 minutes. It needs to be grilled on the slow side because it has to cook through. And it also needs to be browned up really nicely on both sides. And as you might have noticed, I've covered these ones with tin foil, and that kept the heat in perfectly and worked really well to create that nice oven effect. Now check out these beauties. You know, if you like English muffins, you really like these because homemade is always better. There's lots of ways to serve an English muffin. You can go ahead and cut it in half and toast it. That's how I like it done. Slather it with a little bit of butter, put some cheese whiz on it, or perhaps some creamed honey. That's only a couple of ideas. You can put anything on it that suits your fancy, or make it into a breakfast sandwich. Next, there will be a short video showcasing the breakfast sandwich. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and comment in the comment section. And thank you for subscribing to my channel. And I'll talk to you next time.